This lesson's on rotations. A rotation is when a figure is turned around a fixed point. There are certain rules that you can apply to doing these, and you can remember the rules or you can remember a shortcut. I'll first explain what the rules are, but then I'll also explain maybe the logic behind this, and you can kind of work with it that way. So this one says 90 degrees clockwise, 90 degrees counterclockwise, and 180 degrees. Now, most of the time, if they actually give you a direction, you can follow those directions. But sometimes it will actually not tell you which direction it's turning. In that case, it's going counterclockwise. That is the default way whenever we're doing a rotation. Now, the thing is, these are all technically all three possible rotations. There's also 360, but that gets it back to its original spot. 90 degrees clockwise is the same as 270 degrees counterclockwise. So if it says 90 degrees just by itself, you notice that's 90 degrees counterclockwise. If it says 270 degrees, it will be the same as 90 degrees clockwise. Now, the rules are 90 degrees clockwise or 270 degrees counterclockwise. XY maps to Y negative X. For 90 degrees counterclockwise, XY maps to negative Y X. And if it's 180 degrees, then XY maps to negative X, negative Y. Now, here's the nice little trick that you can kind of remember to it. Okay. If we don't ignore the zero on this, and we look at these, we've got 90, 180, and 270. And I'm going to focus with this as counterclockwise because that is the normal situation. Okay. Notice with 90, and again we're doing the counterclockwise, it is negative Y then X. Okay. With 180, it is negative X negative Y. And with it being 270, it is Y negative X. So notice, again, if we ignore the zeros on this, we've got 9 and 7 that are both odd. Since they're odd, notice that the X and the Y switch locations. Now the signs, I'll show you another way of looking at the signs in a minute. But if we look at the 180, that's even. The even is not odd, so notice the X and the Y stays in the same orientation as the original. So if it turns an odd number, again, not necessarily odd because it's 90 degrees, but think of it as the tens digit being odd, then we know that we are going to switch the X and the Y. Now, the other part on this is the signs. So what you can actually do is intuitively looking at the picture or knowing where it's going to turn, you can kind of figure out what the signs should be when you get to that spot. On an XY axis, okay, the top right is plus plus every time. The top left is negative plus. The bottom left is negative negative, and the bottom right is positive negative. So if you remember about if the signs switch or if the X and Y switch, then you're just worried about which coordinate does it end up being in, and you'll know which signs you can use. So let's actually go ahead and look at one of these ones and see how that works. So on this first one, we've got 90 degrees clockwise. We've got 2, 3 here. So notice we've got this one here, A, at 2, 3. If we go 90 degrees clockwise, we know we're going to go into this quadrant where it's positive negative. So we know A prime is going to have a positive for the first value and a negative for the second value. We just need to figure out what those values would be. So since it's 90 degrees, do these values, or does the x and y stay xy, or does it become yx? Do they switch? Since it's 90 degrees, those switch. So we're going to put the 3 at the front and the 2 at the back. Again, basically we found the positive and negative because we know that it's going to be in the bottom right, and we know that it's switch because it's an odd rotation, not an even rotation. Right, for B, right, so on B prime, right, B also is going to move into quadrant number 4, which means it's going to be positive, negative, right? And since it's 90 degrees, we switch the x and the y, so the 1 stays there, and then the x moves to the back, so the -3 moves to the back, or the 3 moves to the back and becomes negative. For C, it again is going to move into quadrant 4, so we switch, 2 moves to the front, 1 moves to the back, and becomes negative. Now to graph those points, we go right 3, down 2, here's A prime, right 1, down 3, B prime, and then right 2, down 1, C prime. There's our dot, our figure. Alright, moving on to the next problem. This time we're going 90 degrees counterclockwise. So this time counterclockwise is against the clock, so it actually is going to move from this quadrant over here. So it's also going to move into quadrant 4. So we know that this is going to be positive, negative on these. Since it's 90 degrees, we know that the x and the y switch. So I'm going to actually write this a little bit differently this time. I'm going to go ahead and write down all the letters. And then, since I know that these are going to switch, I'm just going to go ahead and switch around the actual values of them. Not the positive and negatives, just the values. So 3 and 5. And then 3 and then 2. And then 5, 2, and 5, 5. Now, since this is quadrant 4, again, it's going to be positive, negative. So I'm going to keep all the first ones positive, and I'm going to change the last ones all to negative. Again, this time I don't have to actually remember which one's which on this. I just remember which quadrant they're moving to, and I know I'd switch them around. Okay, so in this case, we're going to graph these. So we're going to go right 3, down 5. Okay, and there's M prime. Right 3, down 2. There's A prime. Right 5, down to T prime. Right 5, down 5, H prime. Connect these dots. And there's our figure. For example number 3, we're going to rotate 180 degrees. So with 180 degrees, since that's an even number, we're going to keep the x and the y in the same spot. So A prime, B prime, and C prime. Okay. 2 stays at front, 3 stays in back. Get 3, 1, and then 1, 2. With it being 180 degrees, let's look at the original ones. Right, A, 180 degrees will move 2 quadrants. Right, so that moves into quadrant number 3. So notice that both signs are negative. So all we have to do is make those negative. Okay, and B does the same thing. Both those signs are now negative. And C, same thing, negative, negative. All right, now just to graph these points, left 2, down 3, left 3, down 1, left 1, down 2, A prime, B prime, and C prime. Connect those dots, and there's our figure. Now, not all figures are going to be in the same quadrant to begin with, so you might have to look at each individual points to figure out which ones they actually end up being in. So let's look at some examples, and we probably will get one of these in here that does that for you. So, practice number 1. It says, graph and label the pre-image, then rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise around the origin. So let's start off by graphing the original one. So we've got 2, negative 3, then 2, 1, and then negative 2, negative 2. Alright, if I connect these ones, I'll be able to figure these out. This one is A, this one is B, and this one is C. Now, 90 degrees. Okay, so that means it's odd, so we switch the letters or the numbers around. B and C, and move 3 to the front, 2 to the back. And then B prime, 1 to the front, 2 to the back. And then C prime, 2 to the front, 2 to the back. So, moving on from here, let's actually look at each of these values itself. So, starting off with looking at A moves up to quadrant 1. So, quadrant 1 is plus plus. So, we're going to leave those as both pluses. B would move to quadrant 2, which is negative, positive. So we're actually going to put the negative in front of the 1, but keep the 2 positive. Okay. We kept on going. The bottom left is negative, negative, but we don't have that. Then the other one is positive, negative. Notice C would move over here to that one to be positive, negative. So we're going to make the Y value on this one negative. So now we're going to graph these new ones. So we go right 3, up 2. Here is A prime right over where I wrote B. Then negative 1, positive 2 is B prime. And then positive 2, negative 2 is C prime. These ones overlap each other. As long as you label them correctly, you'll be able to tell which one was first and which one was second. Now, moving on to practice number 2. All right, let's go ahead and graph the original on this again. All right, this time it wants us to rotate it 180 degrees. So E is at 4, 4. F is at 4, 2. And G is at 1, 3. So here's our figure. And since it's 180 degrees, the order of these ones stay the same. So this is still 4, 4. This one is still 4, 2. This one is still 1, 3. But we need to check the signs. With it being 180 degrees, it's moving from here down to quadrant 3. Quadrant 3 is negative, negative. So all these signs are negative. Again, you can actually do these problems in different ways, but this is one way that actually might be easier to kind of comprehend. So let's start off with this one at e, negative 4, negative 4. E prime, negative 4, negative 2. F prime, and negative 1, negative 3. G prime. Connect these dots. And there's our figure. So from here, that then takes us to your homework page, which as similar